Hello and welcome to a new episode of Around the World in 7 days. My name is Neil and I am here with the stories behind the most important international news events of the week. All the three stories of today's episode deal with Russia-Ukraine crisis. First of all, we will discuss what is SWIFT and how exclusion of Russia from this system is going to hurt Russia's economy. In the second story, we will discuss the history of formation and dissolution of Soviet Union, and we'll also discuss the question that is Putin trying to resurrect the Russian Empire. In the last story, we will probe the recent attempt by Ukraine to gain the European Union's membership. But first, let's talk about SWIFT system. In the last week's program, we discussed Russia's invasion of Ukraine. In response to the invasion, several European countries and the US have imposed economic sanctions on Russia. While the sanctions were imposed on various Russian banks, Russia's capability of carrying out business in currencies such as dollar, yen, and euro was also curtailed. As a result, Russia's currency, that is ruble, touched its record low. But America and European countries did not just impose some token sanctions. They also took a decision that has hurt Russia the most. The US, the European Union, the UK, and many of its allies have removed many Russian banks from SWIFT, an important system of international payments. It has deeply impacted the Russian economy. It is being believed that out of all the sanctions imposed on Russia so far, Russia has been hurt the most due to its removal from the SWIFT system. Thousands of financial institutions around the world use the SWIFT system. Earlier, Iran was also removed from the SWIFT system, and as a result, Iran's economy was hit very hard. Russia also largely depends on the SWIFT system for exporting oil and gas. Therefore, Russia's removal from the SWIFT system is being considered as the harshest of all the imposed sanctions. Now the question remains that what is SWIFT and why a country's removal from the SWIFT system hurts its economy so much. So today, we will try to understand what is SWIFT system. We will also try to understand how the SWIFT system works and how Russia's removal from SWIFT system will affect the international politics. SWIFT stands for Society for Worldwide Interbank Financial Telecommunication. It is basically a kind of communication system. In this SWIFT system, various banks of the world are interconnected. More than 11,000 financial institutions and companies are associated with the SWIFT system around the world. Therefore, the SWIFT system has become a crucial platform for international payments these days. It is currently being used in more than 200 countries of the world. Almost all central banks of the world, including Reserve Bank of India, Bank of China, and Federal Reserve, are included in the SWIFT system. It is headquartered at Belgium. Now the question remains that how does SWIFT system work? Institutions and companies using the SWIFT system are assigned a unique 8-digit SWIFT code or a bank identification code. For example, you live in India and you have an account with an Indian bank. Now you want to send money to your relative who lives in France. In such a situation, when you send or transfer money from your account to your relative's account, then you will also be required to submit the SWIFT code. After the SWIFT code's submission, your bank will send a SWIFT message to the bank in France in which your relative has an account. Now, that Bank of France will verify the message, and after the message verification, the payment will be made to your relative. Now you must be wondering that what happens when a country is removed from the SWIFT system. At present, the coverage of SWIFT system has grown to such an extent that it has become a kind of universal system. It has become very difficult to make any payment from one country to another without using the SWIFT system. As you know that Russia has been removed from the SWIFT system, and as its result, Russian citizens will face challenges in sending money outside Russia or receiving money in Russia. Companies will also face challenges in sending money from foreign countries to Russia. It will reduce the cash flow in the market and consequently it will impact the Russian economy. If a country is excluded from the most participated financial services platform, then its foreign funding will also be impacted. In such a situation, that country will be completely dependent on domestic investors. It is especially troublesome at a time when institutional investors are constantly looking for new markets in new sectors. On the other hand, it would be even more difficult to build an alternative system and link it with such an established vast network. As per SWIFT's website, it was first used in 1973 and it went live in 1977 with 518 institutions in 22 countries. The SWIFT system has replaced the earlier system Telex, which was much slower and less maneuverable system. Now let us understand how SWIFT organization works. As we have already mentioned above, that SWIFT system has become essential for banking systems around the world. Shareholders made up of 3,500 firms around the world elect a 25-member board which is responsible for overseeing and managing the company. It is regulated by the G10 central banks of Belgium, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, Netherlands, the United Kingdom, the United States, Switzerland and Sweden, along with the European Central Bank. It is supervised by the National Bank of Belgium. The SWIFT Oversight Forum was established in the year 2012. Europe, the Middle East and Africa contribute the most to the SWIFT system. As per SWIFT's website, the SWIFT financial messaging platform recorded an average of 42 million financial information messages every day in 2021. This is an increase of 11.4% annually. Europe, the Middle East and Africa combined sent 4.66 billion messages. The US and the United Kingdom ranked second with 4.42 billion interactions, while Asia Pacific ranked third with nearly 1.50 billion messages. It implies that the countries from where the maximum messages were sent, the more transactions were carried out by those countries. That is all the information related to SWIFT system. Now let us try to understand what equations can be formed in international politics after Russia's removal from the SWIFT system. The SWIFT system, which has proved its importance in international trade, is so crucial that when Iran was removed from the system in 2018, then Iran's 30% foreign trade got stalled. Therefore, it is being speculated about Russia that its economy may shrink too. However, European countries seem to be divided on Russia's removal from SWIFT system. It is so as Russia is the main supplier of oil and natural gas to the European Union. In such a situation, if the payment option to Russia is closed, then it will also have an adverse effect on the supply of oil and gas. On the other hand, it is not an easy task to find any other alternative of these essential commodities. Hence, countries like Germany, France and Italy have their own challenges which they might have to face due to Russia's removal from the SWIFT system. On the other hand, China seems to be already supporting Russia. But it is being said that Russia can move closer to China after being removed from the SWIFT system, as China has its own separate system of making payments. In today's situation, Russia expects help from China. China might help Russia as the SWIFT system has been formed by American and European banks. China has always desired to end the dominance of Western countries like America in the international market. On the other hand, Chinese President Xi Jinping also desires to curtail the US dollar-dominated global economic structure. In such a situation, it is being believed that Russia's removal from the SWIFT system can be beneficial for China and it can move closer to Russia. But it will be interesting to watch how closeness to China will benefit Russia. After Russia's invasion of Ukraine, all the historical events related to Soviet Union began to unfold. Most of the discussions are being carried about the establishment and disintegration of the Soviet Union. Russian President Vladimir Putin has always been critical of the circumstances under which the Soviet Union was disintegrated. It is believed that he has always dreamt of a united Soviet Union. Therefore, it was always being discussed whether Putin has plans to reintegrate the Soviet Union countries. When Russia annexed Crimea, a part of Ukraine, in 2014, then Putin had made his intentions quite clear. Crimea's annexation by Russia was being viewed as the beginning of the fulfillment of Putin's dream. When Russia invaded Ukraine recently, then Putin's intentions were further cemented. it is being believed that Putin would not limit Russia's invasion to Ukraine. There are some other plans in his mind. After Ukraine, he will also consider about invading the other neighboring countries of Russia. He would first of all invade all these countries and then he would stop his invasion. By doing so, he aims to gain control of the erstwhile Soviet Union countries one after the other. Putin had mentioned the Russian Empire in his address to the nation before invading Ukraine. Even then, it was being predicted that he desires to extend the Russian Empire the way it was before First World War. If this prediction turns out to be true, then it will be no less than a tragedy for the entire world. In such a situation, the biggest question remains that how the Soviet Union was formed and how the Soviet Union was disintegrated. Let us try to understand the Soviet Union's story from the very beginning. When the Bolshevik Revolution took place in Russia in 1917, then the Russian Empire was overthrown by ousting Tsar Nicholas II from power. After Bolshevik Revolution, Russia tried to move towards democracy. However, during this period, a civil war broke out in Russia. It took Russia about 5 years to overcome its internal conflicts. After extreme efforts, the far-flung states were annexed into Russia under Lenin's leadership. The Soviet Union was officially formed in 1922. Vladimir Lenin became its head. However, Russian Empire consisted of about 17 countries before its fall. But when the Soviet Union was formed in 1922, then Ukraine, Belarus, Georgia, Armenia and Azerbaijan were annexed by signing treaties with these countries. There were people of different sects and cultures in the Soviet Union. There was a lot of diversity among these people. However, the Russians formed the largest population in this Soviet Union. Lenin was of the view that citizens of all countries that had joined the Soviet Union would gradually be assimilated in the Russian culture and one day Soviet Union would become a better country. But Lenin died in 1924 and Joseph Stalin took the Soviet Union's command. However, Stalin proved to be a great dictator. With the passage of time, parliament was formed in the Soviet Union, but all the decisions were taken by the Communist Party. Stalin made the Soviet Union a one-party country, just like today's China. Politburo, that is Communist Party's committee, used to take every decision, including selecting the country's head. Gradually, the party fully controlled the Soviet Union's politics, economy, and common life. During the Second World War, the Soviet Union once again tried to regain its old regions. It occupied Poland in 1939 by sending troops, and it also established control over Finland by 1939's end. However, later these countries were granted independence. But the Soviets also captured the Baltic countries like Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia in 1940. Some countries of the Eastern Europe were under the control of fascist forces during the same period. These countries were Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, and Romania. The Soviet army liberated these Eastern European countries from these fascist forces and exerted its own influence in the political and social system of these countries through the socialist system. For this reason, these countries were known as the socialist camp countries or the Second World countries. The Soviet Union was the socialist camp's leader. The Second World War came to an end in 1945, but the world was divided into two camps and the Cold War started. One camp was led by the Soviet Union and the other camp was led by the US. Meanwhile, Joseph Stalin died in 1953. After his death, many leaders from Nikita Khrushchev to Mikhail Gorbachev came to the power in Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was the only empire in the whole world that had defeated Hitler in the Soviet-German War. When the Cold War started with the US, then the Soviet Union joined the nuclear race. The Soviets played a pivotal role in the Vietnam and Cuban revolutions. Before its disintegration in 1991, the Soviet Union was bordered by the Arctic Ocean in the north and by the Pacific Ocean in the east. It was bordered by North Korea, Mongolia, China, Afghanistan, Iran, and Turkey in the south. The Soviet Union's southern frontier touched three seas, that is, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov. It was bordered by Romania, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, Finland, and Norway in the west. In the 1970s, the Soviet Union started interfering in the politics of Afghanistan. The Soviet army remained in Afghanistan for 10 long years, but it could not achieve anything. On the other hand, Soviet Union's system was further weakened. The import of food grains was increasing year after year. The Soviet Union lagged behind the US in terms of economic growth, and the Soviet Union's GDP fell to half that of US in the 1980s. The socialist system was becoming dominant in the Soviet Union. Educated people in Eastern European countries started opposing the Soviet Union system because of dominating dictatorship, bureaucracy, and weakening economy. In the 1980s, Soviet Union countries started demanding independence. The movement for independence started in Lithuania in 1988 and it spread to Estonia as well as Latvia. On the other hand, the Berlin Wall was torn down in November 1989. From 1961 to 1989, the Berlin Wall existed as a symbol of ideological differences and the struggle for dominance between the democratic bourgeoisie countries and the former communist regime. Therefore, the fall of Berlin Wall also changed the Soviet Union's system. During this period, the then Soviet Union President Mikhail Gorbachev wanted to reform the Soviet Union's turbulent system. He was handed over a poor economy and an inefficient political structure. Therefore, he had started a reform program. He had introduced two policies, namely Perestroika and Glasnost. The first policy was aimed at reducing the government's control, and the second policy was aimed at adopting openness and transparency. Actually, both these policies were introduced for benefiting the private sector. It was intended at increasing innovation and promoting foreign investment. But the Communist Party ousted Mikhail Gorbachev from power and he was taken into custody. The then Soviet Union President Boris Yeltsin met with the leaders of two Soviet Union countries on 8 December 1991. These leaders were the then President of Ukraine, Leonid M. Kravchuk, and the leader of Belarus, Stanislav Shushkevich. The joint statement issued by both these leaders is known as Belaveza Accords. As per the accord, the Soviet Union was to be disintegrated and a Commonwealth of independent states was to be formed in its place. The constituent countries of the former Soviet Union were to be included in the Commonwealth. It is believed that this accord proved to be the last nail on the Soviet Union's coffin. 8 of the 12 Soviet Union countries joined the Commonwealth by signing the Alma-Ata Protocol on December 21, 1991. After the Alma-Ata Protocol was signed, the hope of Soviet Union's survival also ended. The Soviet Union president addressed the country from Kremlin on December 25, 1991, and he announced his resignation from presidency. With this announcement, the Soviet Union was disintegrated. With the disintegration of the world's largest communist country, 15 independent republics came into existence. These countries were Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, and Ukraine. For this reason, Russia has invaded Ukraine as it still considers Ukraine as a part of its forgotten history. It is believed that Soviet Union system faced crisis due to liberalization and democratization, and as its result, the Soviet Union was disintegrated. If Gorbachev had not introduced the economic reforms in the Soviet Union, then it would probably have existed till today. President Putin has always objected to the circumstances which led to the disintegration of the Soviet Union, and he has expressed the same from time to time. In short, Putin still dreams of forming a united Soviet Union. Before invading Ukraine, Russia had deployed its forces on the Ukrainian borders and diplomatic talks were going on to de-escalate the Russia-Ukraine dispute. Russia had laid down a demand for not attacking Ukraine. Russia was demanding that Ukraine should not be granted NATO's membership. However, Russia eventually attacked Ukraine as its demand was not accepted during the diplomatic talks. In short, NATO is considered to be the biggest reason behind Russia-Ukraine dispute. NATO was being discussed everywhere during the ongoing Russia-Ukraine dispute, but the European Union, the organization that unites European countries, was hardly discussed. However, the European Union did impose several economic sanctions on Russia after it invaded Ukraine, but prior to Russia's attack on Ukraine, while the US tried its best to avert the Russia-Ukraine war, the European Union, it is said, did not try that hard for averting the war. Now, it is in news that Ukraine has expressed desire to acquire European Union's membership. President Zelensky had applied for Ukraine's inclusion in the European Union. Zelensky's application has now been approved by the European Parliament, but the overall process of grant of membership will take time. In such a situation, the question remains that why Ukraine decided to acquire the European Union's membership at this juncture. At a time when Ukraine is under invasion from Russia, why does it want to acquire the European Union's membership in such a haste? Actually, Russia is objecting to Ukraine being granted NATO's membership, as Ukraine will then get NATO's full support. But Ukraine is also expected to get full support or the same support from the European Union after acquiring the EU membership. There is an article in the NATO treaty which is considered most crucial for security of NATO countries. Article 5 of the NATO treaty states that if any member countries of organization is attacked in Europe or North America, then it will be considered an attack on all member countries. It means that if any member country of an organization is attacked, then all other member countries will unite in retaliation. Article 5 was implemented when the 9/11 attacks were carried out on the US. When the US had attacked Afghanistan, the army of NATO countries had also joined the attack. Due to this provision, Russia objects that Ukraine should not get NATO's membership. But at present, Ukraine is expecting to get the same support from European Union as it would have got from NATO had it become NATO's member, and hence Ukraine has applied for the European Union's membership in haste. However, but the question remains that will Ukraine becoming the European Union's member prove to be as big a challenge for Russia as it would have been if Ukraine had become NATO's member? Ukraine's military power is supposed to increase more than expected after becoming the European Union's member. It is so because after becoming the European Union's member, it becomes the responsibility of the European Union member countries to support the member country which is under invasion from the enemies. There is a mutual defense clause regarding all these circumstances, and hence it becomes mandatory to support the country which is in trouble. It implies that the member countries achieve great powers against the enemies. Now let us understand what is the Mutual Defense Clause. Article 42 of the European Union Treaty refers to this clause. Clause 7 of Article 42 states that if a member country is subjected to an armed attack on its territory, then the other member countries shall support the member country under attack in every way they can. It means that just as there is a provision for security of member countries in NATO treaty, the same provision are also there in the European Union Treaty. Article 222 of the Treaty of Functioning of the European Union also appeals for the solidarity of European Union member countries. It states that if a member country is the victim of a terrorist attack or natural or man-made disaster, then the European Union and its member states shall act jointly in the spirit of solidarity. The European Union shall utilize all the resources made available by member states in settling any issue. It also includes military resources. It means that the European Union will not hesitate in sending its army to fight along with Ukraine in the war against Russia. Besides, becoming the European Union's member can prove to be extremely beneficial for Ukraine from an economic point of view, as the European Union was formed keeping in mind the economic progress. After coming under European Union's purview, Ukraine will get an open market with all European countries, and all Ukrainian goods will be able to move from one country to another without any restriction. In addition, Ukrainians will also be granted several rights. The most important of these rights is that if a Ukrainian migrates to any European country, then the refugees will not be required to apply for asylum for 3 years. It means that after coming under the European Union's purview, Ukraine will get a huge security cover for protecting its citizens. Besides, another notable thing is that 21 countries of the European Union are also members of NATO. In such a situation, it is being said that membership of EU will pave the way for Ukraine to join NATO. Then, not only the US will be able to support Ukraine directly, but also NATO will be able to provide full support to Ukraine. However, it remains to be seen that how much support Ukraine will get from the European Union and how effective the support will be in the Russia-Ukraine dispute. Now let us look at the 3 questions based on today's bulletin. 1. What is SWIFT payment system? How will Russia's economy be affected after its removal from the SWIFT system? Describe. 2. Under what circumstances was the Soviet Union formed? What were the reasons behind its disintegration? Evaluate. 3. How does the European Union benefit its member countries? Describe with special reference to the recent Ukraine crisis. That is all for this episode of Around the World in 7 days. See you next week with more stories that are shaping the world around us. Till then, stay tuned.